Okay, we are making the red. I have red, black, white, and then green because I'm going to show you how to make the desaturation of this too. So hue is just the basic color. The basic color means there is no tint, no shade, no other color added into it. It could be primary, secondary, or tertiary. So we are painting number 3, the third design on yours is going to be the hue. And then if you have space to go ahead and paint the inside little area, you can make that your hue as well. Just kind of practice that detail line. If you have too much water in your brush, it's going to get kind of runny. So, there's the... Okay, then to make a tint. Tint is in when you add white plus the hue. It's always easier to start with a lighter color. So I start with white and I add a little bit of color into it. This is a palette knife. You take a little bit of that red, you can mix it in. Obviously, the least amount of color that you add in, the lighter that this color will turn. If you mix the paint with your paintbrush, you're going to get it stuck in the bristles, and then when you go to use that color later, it's going to be a little distorted. So it's better to use the palette knife. So you have your lighter color. This made pink because red plus white makes pink. So paint your second division, your tint. Shade is when you have your hue plus black. And black is an intense color that changes pretty quickly. So it's always better to start with your color. I'm going to mix a little bit off to the side. Start with your color and then add a very small amount of black to it because it gets dark pretty quick. Obviously, the more color you add in, the more black that you add, the darker it will get. So start slowly with adding black to make it darker, but this is how you make maroon. If you don't notice a difference between your hue and your shade, then you don't have enough black added in. And if you don't notice a difference between your tint and your hue, you don't have enough white added in. You can't have a delicate balance. So your fourth color should be a shade. Desaturation. Let's switch down to complementary. Complementary means opposite on color wheel. So these are colors opposite of the color wheel. So the opposite of red is green, which means you're going to start with whichever one is a lighter color. Both of these have kind of the same composition. I'm going to have red and I'm going to add a little bit of green into it, and you'll notice how it's going to start changing that. The desaturation means it tones it down. So this is going to make kind of a burgundy type color, but when you're mixing it, if it still looks pretty similar to the red that it was to start with, then you need to add a little bit more of the opposite color to make the desaturation. And keep adding it until there's enough color change that you can tell a difference whenever you color it on. So here's kind of the muted color, the desaturation of red. You'll also find that if you would have started with the green and added red into it, it would look a little bit different. But the desaturation of red, depending on how much green I added in, it's going to look very similar to my shade because you're toning it down. You're making it darker, just the same way that a shade makes something darker. But just to experiment, if I would take that tint and I would add this desaturation into it, I can make an interesting color, and I can kind of test that out over here. So that's where color theory and testing out colors is going to be to your advantage whenever you're painting your pottery, is testing out combining a tint with a desaturation or with a shade and see what you get. So the desaturation is the hue plus its complement. So the order of these is the inside of whatever color you're on is your hue, the second layer is your tint, the third layer is your hue, the fourth layer is your shade, and the fifth layer is your desaturation. And you're just doing that as you go across in any order that you want. It makes sense to me that if I'm on a red, that I would go ahead and do, oh, I didn't do my red violet up here. Red violet. I would go ahead and after I finished my red, I would mix up my red orange, I would mix up my red violet so that I would get all those done together. But do whatever order makes sense to you without wasting very much paint. Kind of work with your table mates so that you guys can use the colors together and have less you have to work on, or two of you could be working on ones at the same time so you could share your paint palette, because you don't want to have a bunch of paint left over at the end.